Hello, and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast. This is episode 134, The Acapella Connection with Deke Sharon. When you perform, it's your job to go out there and save a life. This is the argument made later in the episode by my guest this week. In this episode, I welcome the father of contemporary acapella, Deke Sharon, onto the show. We discuss the origins of the modern a cappella genre, as well as the family tree of other types of a cappella vocal music genres and their crucial connections with each other. We also get to hear the story of how the actors in the Pitch Perfect movie learned to sing from scratch in a month. We cover the importance of commercial viability in our art forms, as well as the incredible power of group music making to heal political divides and encourage cooperation. So much more packed into this episode along the margins as well. Deke is a compelling storyteller, so I know that you will want to listen to this one all the way to the end. Before we get into the meat of the episode, just another reminder that I am leading a fantastic chamber choir singing opportunity for adults 18 and over by audition in June 21st to the 25th, and you can sign up now. Link will be in the show notes at contourikc.com. And you can head there and submit your materials and make plans to be in Kansas City for 5 days with me to make some incredible music. You can also find on the website some links to the quality of performance that this group has done historically. If you want to check it out, if you've been hankering for some performance opportunities, this is a good one for you. Don't forget, you can enter Choralosophy at checkout to get a discount on sheet music when you go to ryanmain.com, who's just got incredible stuff on his website, especially if you teach those middle school and high school age singers like I do. You can also go to graphitepublishing.com and search their growing stable of composers there, and search in their awesome web search feature and find exactly the piece that you want, download it and print it today. Even better, you can enter Choralosophy at checkout and save 10%. If you need the top-of-the-line choral folders labeled with gold embossed print and all of that fun stuff, I do that for my All-Staters every year, but if you need a set for your choir, I would head over to mymusicfolders.com and also enter Choralosophy at checkout to save 5%. Have you been listening to this show regularly for a while now, but still have not joined the Patreon? It's time. Patreon.com/Choralosophy. Chip in $3 a month. It's the cost of a coffee. And the recurring little bits of income from each of you, the awesome group of supporters over there, are really keeping this show alive. That underwrites all my costs so that I don't have to dip into my own personal family pocket to make this show and to keep the content and professional development coming to you at a high level of quality. Plus, there's lots of really fun goodies there for the supporters at Patreon. The producers are Brian Long, Chandler Smith, Venture Studios, John Warner, Jonah Clixbull, Angie Schilling, David Kowalczyk, Jared Hendricks, Kyle Peterson, Max Jackson, Michael Herron, Nathan Hines, Ryan Main, and Steve and Kathy Kikachik. Okay, everybody, I'm here with Deke Sharon, and we're going to be discussing the power that harmony and making music together in ensemble has to change people, change the world potentially. And we all, of course, listening to the show already believe in that power, but the next step is how do we bring it out into the world, and we're going to get some feedback and some ideas from Deke Sharon. So Deke, welcome.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. I like choral music and I like philosophy, so I feel like I'm in the right place.
Yes, that's very good. That's very good. Well, why don't you start by introducing yourself to the audience, just a little short biography of you, and how you came to be doing music in the way that you're doing it now.
Sure. Well, I started out singing before I could speak. I bounced my head on my pillow and I sang myself to sleep before I could even speak. My parents were all worried I was giving myself brain damage, but by age 5, I was in the local church choir. By age 7, in the San Francisco Boys Chorus. And at age 9, I was the youngest member of the concert group and operas with Pavarotti and touring around. Then it was The Music Man, the musical in freshman year of high school that got me hooked on barbershop. I kept that quartet going all 4 years, started to learn how to arrange. College a cappella group came to my high school and I fell in love with that. Went off to Tufts University in the double degree program with the New England Conservatory of Music, studying modern sounds, jazz, voice, improvisation, classical music. But it was the collegiate a cappella experience with the Tufts Beelzebubs that really filled my heart, because every weekend we were out there on the road performing. And yet I was frustrated that everybody was singing For the Longest Time and Blue Moon and Don't Worry, Be Happy. And I wanted to do Led Zeppelin and Peter Gabriel and Pink Floyd. all the college rock that was blasting out of dorms at the time. So I started to experiment with using your voice as an instrument and pioneering what I called vocal percussion, which ended up becoming a cornerstone of a cappella over time. But I graduated and I was like, I want to make a career of this. I want to spread this music. This is the way to get more people singing, and I want to give this back. So everyone laughed at me. I mean, even my high school choral director said it's like Deke's trying to make a career out of professional tiddlywinks. But I was like, no, this can be really big. I promise. And it was an overnight success 20 years later. But the a cappella competition that's in the Pitch Perfect movies, I started, and compilation albums, festivals, publishing companies, and just really trying to popularize the style of music, both behind the scenes and as a singer myself, with the first a cappella group that had a designated vocal percussionist called the House Jacks, and toured around the US, toured around the world for almost 25 years doing that. And I started to get really busy because the phone started ringing, and then it was NBC to make the Sing Off, and it was Elizabeth Banks to make the Pitch Perfect movies, and so on and so forth. So yeah, my life has been crazy and varied, but basically I'm just an overgrown choir nerd a cappella geek.
That's awesome. And now the audience probably already knows, and maybe if you're familiar at all with my show, you might already know this too, but the a cappella genre, subgenre of choral music is not my world. I didn't grow up in it. I've never participated in it. The only thing I've ever done is just had a few student groups do pop a cappella stuff for some variety shows, and I've mentored them and coached them the best I could in those situations. But it's just not the water I swim in. And so hearing you tell those stories, of course, of that kind of commercial success of group singing, which is essentially the common. So I'm thinking, again, you mentioned philosophy. I'm thinking about this as like a hierarchical structure of almost like you got one of those graphs with group singing at the top, and underneath that is maybe the traditional Eurocentric choir, and then there's also the, maybe a tribal type setting where people sing and then chant together, and then maybe there's the religious context, and then there's pop a cappella. I'm just from a different part of the family tree, so hearing you tell that story is fascinating to me because it's definitely not part of my world. Now, I also have to ask. So you are really the inventor of beatboxing, of vocal percussion in that way?
Well, okay, yes and no. Okay, beatboxing existed in the 80s, right?
Right.
But back then it was the Fat Boys, and it was like, brr, huh, stick, a stick, a boop, boop, huh, huh, huh. Like, you couldn't take that and drop it into Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. What I needed and what I wanted was to take a group of 14 guys and turn them into a vocal symphony, turn them into a rock band without instruments.
Right.
So it was actually the first song I ever really did this with was Peter Gabriel's "In Your Eyes," which is like the song was going up the charts, and I always wanted to arrange something on a Tuesday night, teach it Wednesday and Thursday, do it Friday and Saturday at colleges, and blow people's minds. They're like, "Wait, this song is just now on the radio. How are you guys doing this song when everybody else is singing, Only You, or old classics?" So that song is just filled with world percussion. So I had to figure out, how do you make a talking drum, like do 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 do, and the shaker, and the hi-hats, and laying these parts on top of each other and creating the symphony of sound in the background parts rather than just singing ooh. I'd have them flange their voices so they sound like synthesizers, and all of this. And you put all these pieces together, and I remember the first time we performed it, after we were done, there was just silence for like too long. And I was like, uh-oh. And then everyone leapt out of their seats screaming.
Yeah.
And I was like, it felt like the end of a movie. And I was like, okay, this is it. This is the way we can start making this music happen. But it never was like, oh, let's figure out how to beatbox with a cappella. It was like, let's figure out how an a cappella group can do any kind of music. Because if you think about it, a cappella predates language. I mean, birds and crickets and whales, like they speak, they communicate through sound.
Right.
And so humans were clearly doing that. And then the earliest forms of music before instruments were invented, and then all the way through human history and culture, from sea shanties and field hollers and work songs and Gregorian chant, and all of these different aspects of the musical traditions from all the way around the world are a cappella. And if you go back 100 years, we now call that barbershop, but that was the pop music of the time, sung with just voices. You go back 50 years, we call it doo-wop. right? A lot of those
Yeah.
street corner tunes started a cappella, and then the producers didn't really trust that a cappella could work on the radio, so they added some instruments behind it, and everybody knows those old classic tunes now. But it's all the same thing, people using their voices to sing popular music. And now we just have new techniques to be able to reflect a style of music, popular music, that's much more rhythmic
Hmm.
and more timbrally diverse and more layers of sound.
Yeah, no, that's really good, and I like in a lot of ways you're taking my kind of concept I was using before of just kind of the family tree of all the different types of group singing, and finding those common threads, and I really like that explanation. That's really awesome. I want to take us back to your college days real quick because you said something in your story that also piqued my interest, where you were talking about how you were in choir, but you were also in this a cappella group that was touring, and you mentioned maybe like a group of 14 or whatever it was that you said that was in that group. Now, what was it, do you think, about that experience, especially since the whole a cappella craze hadn't really begun yet, that really grabbed you, and made it so that was it the music itself? Was it the camaraderie? Was it a little bit of everything? Tell us more about that.
All Well, that's a really good question. I remember the first time I really felt like I was hit by a lightning bolt was at summer camp when I was in elementary school, and we're sitting around the campfire, and the guitarist is strumming, and people are singing melodies and whatever. And the person next to me starts improvising a simple harmony, a third above, simple Simon and Garfunkel type stuff. And I was like, wait, you can make up vocal parts that work with other vocal parts and they sound really good. I mean, yeah, I've been a boy choir. You do what you're told, sit down,
Uh-huh.
stand up, sing your parts. And I was like, that's awesome. And then for me, when I was in high school and I saw this college a cappella group, the Tufts Beelzebubs, come back and sing, it blew my mind. There's something so compelling about just voices, about people. And this is why a cappella is at the core of so many religious traditions, so many important ceremonies and times in our life when you just really want to be lifted up. And in fact, what are the holidays without a cappella, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the music that's going to make you feel the most warm and fuzzy, that's going to bring people together? And that's why every a cappella group out there, every choir, they make all their money in December.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants, like, all of a sudden they're like, yep, we want that warm fuzzy feeling. We want to feel connected. We want to feel lifted up or whatever. So I had that feeling, but then I saw it's a bunch of college guys. Later, I found out, like, it's a chem major, and there's one guy from the musical theater department, and this guy's poli sci, and this guy is computer programmer and whatever. And most of them are not music majors. They're just people who have nice voices, and they rehearse twice a week, and then they go out and they sing these songs. And I was just like, there's something really fun and magical about it. And
Mm-hmm.
really, I mean, it took 25, 30 years to get pitch perfect in front of people. But then when that happened, all of a sudden the world just went, loved it. And of course, before that, the sing off, when we were taking actual college groups and putting them on NBC and having
Right.
people love it. In fact, so much that the TV show Glee said, we need that in our show. And they got the Tufts Beelzebubs to sing all the parts for the Dalton Warblers. And then they had, Darren Criss sing lead vocal over the top of it. And then a bunch of guys lip sync to it. I mean, but it
Yeah.
was a cappella. They were like, that's so compelling. We need it in our show.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about some of that commercial stuff because that's really cool. And so the just so I have your storyline right or have your timeline right, it was
Sure.
so it was the sing off that was happening before the Pitch Perfect movies. Is that correct?
That's right. In fact, a little piece of trivia is the reason the sing off exists and existed was because a couple of creatives, Sam Weisman, who directed the Mighty Ducks 2 movie, and George of the Jungle, and some other great films, and did a lot of like old Family Ties, whatever. He, along with a friend of his who was the producer for Sex, Lies, and Videotape and other films, they came up with a script about a male college a cappella group, and one of the writers on the script is Brad Hall, who's husband of Julie Louis-Dreyfus. He used to be in the old cast of Saturday Night Live. And they had this were like, college a cappella guys, this could be a huge movie. And they brought this idea to Sony. And Sony said, yeah, I don't know, but what about a reality show? Like the reality singing shows are really big right now, because it was American Idol time, but it was before The Voice happened.
Right.
And the Sony said, no, but let's try this TV show. And the TV show took off like a rocket on NBC. But Sony kept kind of dragging their feet. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Banks bought the rights to this nonfiction book, Pitch Perfect, that follows three different college groups. One of them, the one I was in, the Tufts Beelzebubs, were kind of the models for the troublemaker in the movie, the
Okay.
douchey guys. And then a female group that really changed the sound of female a cappella, the Barden Bellas, are based on the University of Oregon de Vesey. Um, so I get a phone call while I'm literally on set making this TV show, and I was super excited to have an opportunity to make this movie. But I had to go to the executive producers and say, I just heard this film's been greenlit over at Universal, and so I'm going to go make that. And it's crushing for them because that was their whole goal. They were like, an a cappella movie could be huge. But as you can probably imagine, once like one big a cappella movie gets made, then it's harder for the others to kind of follow in
Yeah.
its footsteps.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, what was your role in the movie? If your school or church are in the market for staging products like risers, shelves, podiums, movable platforms, all of the things that you need to set your choir up for success, I would like to strongly urge you to check out StageRight. StageRight's products are sturdy, they're durable, they're easy to use. I have personal experience with the acoustical shelves and some of the platforms that they have at StageRight, and I can tell you, compared to some of the more expensive competitors, they are a really great option to fit inside of a tight school budget, but also to give you the durability and usability that you need. So check out StageRight at stageright.com. What part of the creative process were you involved in?
Well, I got brought in really early, like sitting around the table and looking at early drafts of the script and kind of picking songs that would work for these different scenes. And
Okay.
then my role on the show is part of the music staff, so arranging the music. And there were a few of us who like worked together and handed things off and made it all happen. I was the music director for the films, so I sat down and did like rehearsals with all the Barden Bellas and all the other singers, both as a group and then one on one. And I made sure that all of them sang their parts perfectly before we then recorded them in the studio. So I'm a vocal producer because we needed to make sure all of them sang their parts great and then put all this energy in the microphone. And then the last thing I would do on set is to sit back and watch them lip sync to their own voices as they were filming the scenes with the dancing and the moving and all that stuff on it. Plus my own voices on a bunch of stuff throughout the movies, like the sock puppets and Doc Sound Machine and the backgrounds of the Troublemakers. And I'm
Yeah.
also the kind of German commentator in the second movie. Elizabeth
Oh,
Banks was like, Deke, we got to get you on the screen. Go do something. And she was like, what languages do you speak? And I said, well, I studied French in school, but I don't look French. I look German and I can sound like any language. It's no problem. So she wound me up and made me the German commentator. And Flula Borg was so great. He helped me say this German.
oh, I
I still
remember
remember
Flula.
it. Yeah.
That's
Oh, he's
awesome.
great. He's great.
Yeah.
And he's in our new Pitch Perfect television show, Bumper in Berlin. It's on Peacock right now.
Okay. That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So you're when you're working with with these actors too, and trying to get them to be able to sing in the way that will play into the microphones and all those things you said, would you? I mean, you feel free to not reveal any trade secrets that you're not allowed to reveal. But were we hearing the actual actors?
Yeah, yeah, it was a big
Wow.
part of the show and a piece of this whole puzzle that was really important to all of us. We wanted the music to be real, and we wanted the music to come from them. Hardest month of my life was acapella boot camp because the guys were a couple leads from Broadway, Skylar Aston, who'd been in Spring Awakening, and Ben Platt, who of course later goes on to Dear Evan Hansen fame. And then the background singers mostly were drawn from local college a cappella groups. Give me like middling college a cappella singers. I'm on it. I know what to do.
Uh-huh.
The Barden Bellas, 9 of the 10 of them were cast because their actresses were comedians and like had a nice voice or something. And only one of them came from our a cappella world. And I remember on the first day sitting them all in a circle and asking how many of you sang in an a cappella group, and none raised their hands except the one ringer we brought in. And I was like, okay, how many of you sang in choir in school? And none of them raised their hand. And then one said, does a semester in middle school count? And that's when the blood drained from my face,
Oh,
okay?
wow.
Because as a choral expert, you can probably know their voices are so different, right? So Anna Kendrick has this kind of Broadway voice, right? And then Anna Camp has this kind of nasally like tone and piercing. And then Esther Dean has this kind of low husky thing. And Rebel Wilson sings with Australian vowels, so you put all these things together and you try to create a blend. You have 1 month, go.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't sleep a lot. It was, yeah, it was crazy, but and somehow it all came together. I mean, I guess I had enough karma points
Yeah.
built up.
Now,
So,
so I'm really
yeah.
glad to hear that story because I that's definitely something that I didn't know. I just didn't know how that worked behind the scenes. Of you essentially had to play choir teacher for beginners in order to get that to work. What was?
Yeah, and it wasn't easy because these parts, like these arrangements, it was one on a part all the way through. And these were not simple things. I mean, the early parts of the movie, they're singing more kind of like 90s traditional a cappella that doesn't have a lot of, layers or complexity in it. But then by the end, we just blow it out. And the parts are not easy to sing, the different vowels and things, and then blending, and then they had to do it while they're dancing. And yeah, it was a heavy
Wow.
lift.
Now, so tell us a little bit about how that teaching process went in terms of like just some of the pedagogy. Was anything notated? Did they have to do it all by ear?
Yes.
How did that work?
No. So the real challenge in the first movie, and the thing that made the second and third much easier, is I figured out how each of them worked. So Esther Dean, for instance, she wrote a bunch of Rihanna's songs. She co-wrote the song "Firework" for Katy Perry.
Oh, okay.
She doesn't read music, but she has
Hmm.
her own system that involves like lines and layers around the lyric, and then she knows what it means by I don't know. And then Rebel Wilson also doesn't read music, but she has this system of arrows, right? And then this person learns entirely by ear. Someone like Anna Kendrick has done all this Broadway, so she likes sheet music. And basically, by the time the second movie rolled around, I knew exactly how all of them learned. I knew what they needed. I mean, everything was notated in sheet music. Everybody also got a learning recording from the demos we recorded so they could, the producers could hear how everything works and we could pace everything out. So we gave them everything in the world beforehand, but it's a heavy lift to sing contemporary a cappella. And in fact, I was the first ever statewide chair of contemporary a cappella a few years ago for the state of California. And I remember going around and talking to different educators and saying, like, uh, so why is it there isn't more contemporary a cappella in your curriculum? I thought the reason was people kind of turn their nose up on it and at it. But they all, to the last, said, no, it's because it's so hard.
Yeah.
Like, it's just really complicated. And I thought, oh, got it. So we need, more beginner tunes. We need more pieces out there and learning recordings and different resources. But it's still, contemporary a cappella remains the best gateway drug to getting more guys in your program in the middle school and high school level, guaranteed. So we're still out there fighting the good fight to get more
No,
people
that's
singing.
that's awesome. And in fact, that was the corner I was going to have us turn next anyway. So you might as well be the host of the show. That was a perfect transition because what I was about to ask you is how do we take then all this commercial success and the fact that the people love these movies, they love the show, they love this kind of music, and for a lot of people, if they've never actually sung in a
Yep.
choir at school or if they've never ever been a part of an a cappella group, they would see those things on TV or they would see those things in the movies and they would think of them as, oh, that's good, that's nice entertainment value, and that's things that it's fun to watch. But how do we turn the corner then into using that type of music to get more people singing, to get more boots on the ground, so to speak?
Yeah. Okay. So a few different pieces. Number one, music is music. Okay.
Yep.
So in 300 years, people are going to sing the Beatles' Blackbird like it's a folk song. They won't remember who wrote it, whatever. And then it'll be this like important piece of world culture. Why do we need to wait 300 years? Like the Beatles are the Beatles. Let's sing the Beatles now. Right.
Uh-huh.
And not like put it in a different category than Bach. Like, well, this is music. This is art music. This is important. And this is popular music. We'll put a couple songs at the end of the program. Like it doesn't matter as much. If the whole purpose of music is to connect people, why don't we speak in the vernacular, right? Let's use a different analogy. If you want to get more kids reading, you start with Dr. Seuss, right? You start with Green Eggs and Ham and Hop on Pop, and then you move into Harry Potter, and then, I mean, maybe you can skip over Twilight, but then eventually you get to Shakespeare. You can't run into a classroom and hand out a bunch of Troilus and Cressida and be like, okay, guys, reading's fun, let's go. So you're not going to get a lot of 13-year-old boys signing up to like, your Buxtehude, let's go. They need a way to learn about the mechanics of singing and to bridge that gap. And with music programs being eviscerated generation after generation, which is in part because of recorded music and the fact that we have music and we don't have to be the ones who make it the way people did 100 years ago, we're stuck in this loop where fewer and fewer people have the resources to learn the fundamentals of music, and then they think they're tone deaf. But of course, we know the physiology. They're not tone deaf. If someone says to you, like, I'm tone deaf, you say, no, you're not. Like, they can hear pitch. They just don't have the experience matching pitch the same way that someone who never picks up a basketball would be able to barely ever hit a free throw, right?
Yeah.
But the more they do it, the better they get, et cetera, et cetera. So number one, I think repertoire is key. And hooking more younger kids into music programs with music that they like and that they care about is a huge win. Number two, let's put the thing forward that matters. And that thing is emotion. Let's make musical conveyance and the emotion of music the most important thing. I have a whole theory about this. Having gone to conservatory, having studied and whatever, the instrumental department, they call themselves musicians and they call the vocalists singers. There are singers and there are musicians, right? Yep. So then the choral directors who come through this program have a chip on their shoulder. They want to prove to everybody that they're making real music. This is just as important as instrumental music. And so they go out of their way to focus on the fundamentals, the technical fundamentals. Look, my choir can sing and tune so well, that means it's good. I'm going to differ with that. I'm going to say a good choir is one that reaches people. A good choir is one that touches people's hearts. A good choir is one that gets more and more kids to join it and more people to watch their videos online. And we'll talk about, virality and all of that in a second. But nobody goes into a bookstore and says, please give me the most grammatically precise, perfectly spelled novel you have, right? People want to be taken on a journey.
They want to know what the story is.
Nobody's like going into a movie theater and saying like, you got 16 movies here. I need to know about the cinematography. Who was the cinematographer for each one? And what's their use of chiaroscuro? No. We want to be taken on a journey. So as choral practitioners, as practitioners and educators of choral music, we need to remember that this is what brings people into music, and this is what keeps people in music. And we got a gimme. We got the month of December. We've got choral, music abounding during the holidays because people want that. And that everybody comes in, they sit in the pews, they sit in the risers, they sit in the chairs, they love the holiday program. Where are these people in September? Where are these people in February and in April when we have the end of year concerts? They're not there. And it's because I think we have too many people standing on the risers, scared to death that the director is going to call them out for singing a wrong note, staring in their music folder as if the precision is the purpose. And it is not. It keeps people from loving choral music the way they should. And if you look at traditions and cultures like in the Baltic states, where you'll have 1,000, 10,000 people join in a town square and everyone will raise their voices and sing. When you have, Aboriginal cultures in Taiwan, or if you go to Africa and you have people standing and singing music, you look at the kekak, the monkey chants that are happening in Indonesia, there is a fundamental desire in all humans to sing. And we need to tap into that and stop making it about precision, right? Like Pavarotti is on stage, everybody else shut up, and making it much more about a communal experience, the way that music was. People miss that. And that's why we have so many people when they're watching American Idol or, The Voice, who love watching this. They live vicariously through other people. They sing in the shower. They sing in the car when they're driving themselves to work. Once a year, maybe they'll get drunk and sing karaoke. And the rest of the time, it's everybody that can't sing. And it's an absolute living tragedy that these people are not connected to the first art form that we have, vocal music.
Yeah. Now that's really good. And I think in all of that explanation, your passion for that explanation is wonderful. And I agree with almost all of that. But here's where I'm going to push back. I would wonder, though, if the most passionate choir or a cappella group in the world, that in other words, you can see the passion dripping off of their face, but they sound awful, would also be a struggle. So my point being that to me, it's the precision matters. It's just that we can't stop there.
No, I didn't say that it doesn't matter. I said it's not the point.
Right. And that's what I'm asking you. That's what I'm asking you to clarify.
100%. No. We don't. I'm not saying let's have bad choirs who cry on the risers. No. That's not the point. point is that if we realize and we recognize that the emotional conveyance and the energy and the feeling that the audience has is the most important thing, we choose pieces of music that express emotion. We choose pieces of music that our singers can connect to, so they're actually expressing this music, right?
Mhm.
We explain to our singers what this music means emotionally. We talk about how to present emotion, how to be in that emotional state. And I've written a whole book about this called The Heart of Vocal Harmony, because I've studied and I've looked at, like, why is this not happening in our world? The
Mhm.
bottom line is we need to have groups sing with emotion from the moment they start learning the notes, the same way you need to bake the dynamics in. Every good choral director knows you can't add the dynamics at the dress rehearsal. It's not going to work. The singers are never going to remember it. At best, you're going to have half-baked measures, right? You got to put that in there in the beginning. Dynamics are one of the 4 physical attributes of a piece of music, right? You've got the amplitude of the wave alongside the frequency of the wave, the overtones, and then the spaces in between, which create rhythm, right? The physics of sound. Without dynamics, we're missing one of those 4 characteristics. The emotion, though, overrides all of these things. And if we don't have that emotion baked into the process, then we end up with singers who spend all of their time thinking about C sharps and worrying about cutoffs and looking at the director. And then the primary emotion that generally comes across is fear, because they're worried
Right.
about making a mistake.
Yeah, and
And fear
absolutely.
does not bring in audiences.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And here's how I think of it. So I think of what you just described as that singer who's just worried about the C sharp and worried about where beat 4 is, and all of those
Yep,
those singers have been taught math. They're doing
completely.
they're simply doing math. And
Yeah,
and that's the part, and that's so what I and now the math is important because it's kind of like it's like the building blocks of the art, right? So
sure.
it's the medium that we build with is the pitch and the rhythm and the at what time do I sing what frequency, those types of things those are kind of like
Totally.
they are our bricks, they are our marble. That's what we're sculpting with, and so we have to teach them. I think the reason I'm kind of just being picky with the language here is because I think sometimes when in choral discussions we talk about how important the heart connection is, and because I think actually I agree wholeheartedly with your characterization at the beginning of your narrative there, which was that we do have a chip on our shoulders related to instrumental musicians being considered the tip of the spear, so to
Right.
speak. And I think you're right. I
Yeah,
think I've never heard that argument made before, and I think that's really insightful because we don't an orchestra doesn't have the words and the story to connect to in the same way that we do. And so if we're emulating orchestras, we're gonna stop at the math a lot, and
100%,
I think that's what's kind of going on.
1,000%.
Hmm.
Yeah, and here's the thing: an orchestra can sit there in a chair, looking sideways, looking at their music. Conductors over here, they play the flute, bassoon, string bass, whatever, and the emotional experience is kind of the composite of all of these pieces. But also, frankly, especially when you're dealing with orchestral music, unless it's tied to a score, and this is why all these symphonies are now like playing Indiana Jones or Star Wars, and then people come to fill the seats because they want to see it along with the music. It helps them connect. And also why most symphonies, even professional symphonies, at a best are making a third of their annual payroll based on ticket sales. The rest of it's donations and all these
Hmm.
other sources of funding, right? So fundamentally, this method, if you look at it from an economic standpoint, it's failing. It doesn't work. So for us to copy instrumental musicians is economically not feasible. And moreover, if you think about it, what's the highest praise an instrumentalist can get? They're told they made their instrument sing. The reason instrumentalists are so worked up is they're really frustrated because the singers, the vocalists, are out in front and they get all the attention. We have the fundamental conduit for emotional conveyance, and they have to work all that much harder. Yes, they can press a button and they're probably or definitely in tune, based upon if they're playing piano or clarinet. But so that's harder for us, but ultimately that's not what people care about. Who's the most popular member of every single rock band ever? It's the lead
That's the
singer.
lead singer.
They are the
Mhm.
focus point. Yeah.
Yep.
So we have that tool. We have that fundamentally within us, and we need to not run away from it. We need to lean into it. And we can't have a bunch of people standing there with their faces and then have their hearts disconnected from the music and their faces disconnected. And I tell this to young singers all the time. We are very good at spying out, at identifying people's true emotional state with our eyes closed in the course of 2 syllables, right? You call someone on the phone and they pick up, and the way they say hello, you can immediately tell their emotion, right?
Right.
Hello,
Yeah.
hello, 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 right? So we spend all this time talking about vowel sounds, but what I found is, and this is a great thing about when you lead with and you focus on emotion throughout the educational process, those emotions will drive a higher level of continuity and blend and phrasing. Like, so many of the technical aspects get either completely taken care of or get pushed way down the right path as soon as you've got that emotional connection with your singers and with each other.
Yeah. 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 I know that one of my, as a teacher of choir, one of my most embarrassing teacher moments, and I try not to let it happen very often, but I've been teaching for 20 years and
Fair enough.
I've screwed up sometimes, is when we might be a week or two away from the concert and we can sing the song, whatever it is. We can sing it like all the way through, and maybe it's not memorized, but we have it pretty well learned. And I'll get a kid who will raise
Yep.
their hand and say, "Mr. Muntz, what's this song about?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will realize that I've gone that whole time, and maybe I'm stressed or I'm pressed for time, or thinking that we need to get to this and this before we have time to talk about the connection to it, the emotion of the song, and I usually will just like hang my head if that happens. I'm like,
Oh,
oh crap, have we really not talked about that the whole time? And they're like, no. And I'm like, oh crap. And
yeah.
I always kid,
Yeah.
and I don't do that as much as I used to. But like that, I remember like that's a feeling that I've had before, where I am feeling so pressured and so like at the top of my list is all the technique and all the things that we've got to get done, and then sometimes that gets pushed to the side. And I've talked to colleagues that have that as well. So I think earlier when you said that the technique is not, or the mechanics of it is not the point. That's kind of where I agree, in the sense that if we think, well, what does it mean to say that something is not the point? Well, it's to say that that's not the reason, the underlying cause of why we are gathered here together. We are not gathered here
Completely.
together for those technical things. We're gathered here together to use those techniques to explore these emotions and this art in that way.
Exactly. And lest any of the choral directors who are listening to this right now think like, oh no, I have this whole other thing that I need to put on myself. Having studied this and having looked at this, I've found a very, very important piece of it, which is that you, the director, are not and cannot be the source of this emotion. Okay.
Yes.
Every single person needs to feel for themselves. And as we all know, if you've ever walked with a teenager or pre-teenager through the mall and they're in a bad mood, you can't just turn to them and say like, come on, cheer up, have a good day. What's the matter? Like, it doesn't work. We can sometimes be the reason that people change their mood, but when you're standing up in front of the choir and you're waving your hands even bigger and you're smiling even bigger and you're giving more, it triggers the Aesop's fable that the wind and the rain, versus the sun, to try to get a person's jacket off. You can't blow that person's jacket off. You can't force the choir into having more emotion. In fact, the bigger you get, the more they tend to lean back, because it's kind of sending them the message that you're the one who has to do it, and it has to be pulled out of them. You can't do that.
That the
Right? You just
director
need
is
to be
the
the
show.
sun and shine. It is not, the director's never the show. In fact,
Right.
I tell my choirs all the time, as soon as you can stop looking at me or whoever your director is, do so. Look at
Mhm.
the audience, look in their eyes, sing to them, connect with them. They're the people that are here. And
Mhm.
if a whole line of Marines doesn't need to look at their drill sergeant, nobody needs to look at the director, right? Nobody in an orchestra is looking at the director. They see the director's hands moving. They know and they can tell and they can sense the continuity that's being held together from that. But I think it's far more important for your singers to realize they are the source of the emotion,
Yeah.
and the director is helping to facilitate and bring everyone together, but they need to be responsible for that, and they need to take that and then give it as a gift to the audience.
Yeah. I'm really big with my choirs on the singing to and connecting with each other in addition to the audience. I feel like
Mm,
I feel like the audience is they are made more comfortable engaging emotionally with us when they see that we are engaged emotionally with each other. That's a big deal for me.
1000%. I
Hmm.
completely agree. And in fact, when I'm working with choirs all the time, when they're on the risers or when they're in ARC or whatever, I tell people the only thing you can look at are eyes, the eyes of the other people in your group and the eyes of the audience, right? And you can look at the director's eyes from time to time if you need, but hopefully there's not even a director in front. I mean, a really well-rehearsed group doesn't require a director to be standing front and center,
Hmm.
especially if it's a piece of music that has a steady tempo once it gets going,
Hmm.
move off to the side, let them run it themselves. Duke Ellington wasn't up there, waving his baton all the time. Mozart was at the, over there at the keys and
Hmm.
letting the rest of the band chug along. So then your singers can look at each other and they build up all this energy, and then the smiles and the connections and those wonderful moments that show the camaraderie and the connection between the group, and then they turn and they send that energy out to the audience. Plus, this technique of meeting people's eyes is one of the best ways to fight what I consider your biggest enemy on the risers, which is autopilot. Right? You don't want anyone to phase out and start thinking about pizza or like what do they want to get at Applebee's after the concert or whatever, right? You want them in the moment, thinking about the music, looking at their fellow singers, looking at the audience, connecting, enjoying, or whatever the proper emotion is. And when singers are looking at each other and they're looking at the audience and they're connecting, you can tell when someone's looking at you. Like you wake up from this dazed state of
Right.
future sugar rush. So it's a great way also to keep all of your singers very much in the moment and alive.
Yeah. Yeah. Since I told a story a second ago about one of my more embarrassing moments, now I have to share with you one of my more victorious moments in this
Good, good.
related to this topic. Because so just this last December, my advanced choir from my high school, we have a kind of a tiered program with beginning level, intermediate level, advanced level, those types of things.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
my
Yeah,
advanced group was on their community tour day. And kind of like you were talking about before, it's always in December because that's when everybody wants to hear the choir go around town and
isn't it though?
do
Yeah,
their thing.
yeah.
I call it
Make
tourist
your
season.
money.
It's tourist season,
Yep,
and
totally.
so we're going around around town. And it's an all day tour, and this is a
Hmm.
program we'd prepared. It's like a 30-minute program, and it's a wide ranging styles and different types of things, and it's a lot of music for high school kids, and they've got it mostly memorized by this point. And my beginning level kids were left behind at the school that day, and we had lined up a music familiar sub so that he could come in and help rehearsals facilitate. But then I found out as the day was going that one of our music subs fell through and was not able to come in that day, and we had a
Mm.
concert at the school in 2 days. And so then I'm conflicted. So I've got my advanced kids out doing their big tour day, but then I've got my beginners stuck back at the school without a teacher, and I was kind of I just stuck. I was like, guys, I don't know what to do. Like I don't feel good about leaving them back behind when we've only got 2 rehearsals, and they really need those rehearsals to feel confident. And my advanced kids, they had just been singing their program a couple days ago. They said, just go back to the school. We got this. We
Mm.
can do this without you. In fact, I think on a couple of songs you're kind of getting in our way. And of course
That's
I'm just
great.
yes, and I was just so proud, and so I jumped in my car, left them there. They did a performance
And they
completely without me. They took care of
beautiful.
all the introductions and all the different things, and I zipped back. I ran a rehearsal with my beginners and zipped back to meet him again. It was just such an awesome thing because that's exactly those are the types of moments in group music where they start to rely on each other, and I think that actually in a lot of ways facilitates some of these emotional connections that we're talking about.
Yeah, 100%. And a sense of ownership of the music, ownership of the show and the connection with the audience. I mean, what they learned that day and what they experienced was super important for their ongoing musicianship
Hmm.
and their own leadership abilities and their own connecting with other people. 100%. Fantastic.
I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more about what you're doing now on a day-to-day basis, and how do you involve these types of ideas into your day-to-day career and life.
Sure. Well, I get asked all the time to go around and work with groups, coach groups around the US and around the world. And I do this all the time. And in fact, the first question I ask them as soon as they're done with a piece of music or before they do, like, what's the song about? Why are you singing it? What's the message? What's the meaning? And then all of the choices that I make of course are there to help them. You can't hear the basses. Altos are out of tune. These vowels aren't working, whatever. All of those choices, of course, the technique matters.
Hmm.
But there is an overarching goal, which is let's fill people's hearts. Let's connect people. And this goes to my real theme of my whole life. My life's work is to spread harmony through harmony, get more people singing harmony to try to knit back together the fabric of our society, which
Yeah.
is ripped asunder. I mean, blue states and red states and conservative and liberal. Like, we're spending so much time and energy thinking that other people are the problem, when in fact, other people are the solution. When we work together, we create something that's much better. And it is, of course, vocal music that teaches us that message better than any other skill, any other forum.
Yeah.
So I'm working with groups and trying to coach them and teach them not just how to make the song better, but how to think about the process of making music better. And the technique is a huge part of it, but the emotion and the connecting with the audience and getting more kids involved. And I tell singers all the time when I'm working with them, you have to realize that every single time you sing, even if you don't know the audience or no one comes up to you afterwards, like, your job is to get out there and save a life. You don't know if there's an empty nester who's just lost their spouse. You don't know if there's a middle schooler who's being bullied. And for them to feel the real joy of you singing, and quite possibly then join a singing group and have this in their lives. I mean, you can go to the Chorus America website and read all the articles. Kids are bullied less. They have a built-in group of friends. They have a better sense of self. They stay in school longer. Their grades go up. And the lifelong effects of staying in school longer and getting a college degree, that's $1 million more on the cash money that they'll make over the course of their lives. I mean, these are real world outcomes. And with depression off the charts, with suicide attempts and suicides tripling since the onset of social media, like, teenagers need this. So this is not, for me, this is not just like, oh, it's nice and let's get more people singing. This is like, let's save teen lives through vocal music. And so I'm out there as often as I can, helping festivals get started and trying to work with different directors and make their programs more effective, and to really connect with the kids and the singers themselves and make them feel really fulfilled on stage while they're singing. Because you also know this as a choral director, when kids come back to school, where do they go? They go to the music department. They go to the theater department. They talk to the teachers who had a huge part in their emotional upbringing, as well as teaching them techniques and stuff like that. So you guys who are out there listening to this, who are choral directors, you're the ones who are literally teaching the entire student and making an enormous impact on their lives. So that's a big piece of what I'm doing. The television thing is wonderful. 2 different TV shows last year, Best in Snow for Disney Plus, which is like a snow carving show. And my Disney a cappella group, D Cappella, are like the townspeople who deliver all the rules and everything, but it's all Christmas carols with the lyrics changed. Just really fun.
Yeah.
And then on Peacock, there's a Pitch Perfect TV show called Bumper in Berlin. And we just got renewed for season 2. So that'll gear up really soon. And there's another show for Disney Plus that's I wish I could say it. When I can, I'll announce it. It is international, and it's going to be huge for the choral world at all levels. It's really going to be enormous. So that's very exciting. I was lucky enough to work in movies and do the first all a cappella musical on Broadway called In Transit, which was super fun. There's no Broadway or film happening right now, but you never know. This really seems to be the era of television right now, right? With all the streaming services and all that going on, which is huge.
Yeah.
And it's like that. I'm writing an advanced follow-up to my first book, A Cappella Arranging, with Dylan Bell. So have a huge 400-page tome with how do you create mashups, and how do you arrange in all these different vocal music styles, and how do you teach people and notate, how do you use your voice as an instrument, and advanced concepts around those kind of things, and so on and so forth. I mean, there's still a fire in my belly. I just turned 55, but as far as I'm concerned, our world needs vocal music, choral music, a cappella more than ever.
I agree.
And I'm really trying to help get people, kids, everyone more excited about it. And also, like, by getting out in the mass media, I'm trying to also influence parents' opinions. I mean, there used to be the case when parents would be like, your son, like, no, you're going to do sports or whatever. But then they see Pitch Perfect and they're like, you know what? That looks fun. You can go do that. You never know what the effects are,
right?
but we know that every choral director that I talked to, they said it seriously affected their enrollment. Like more and more and more kids were getting involved in vocal music because they saw the movie, because they
Yeah.
watched the sing off, because they got excited about all of this. Unfortunately, we just got kicked in the teeth by COVID, so now we got to like build that back up. But
Right.
you
Yeah,
know,
there's
that's what we're
almost like
doing.
those types of media give a social credibility to the kids that almost like to, for lack of a better term, that's like now it's cool. Now it's cool to do those things. And
Completely.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And
And
it's not just kids. I mean, back in the 90s, I tried to get to be an a cappella Grammy, and I just got laughed at. Someone on the board was like, "Listen, stop trying. It's never going to happen ever. So stop wasting your time." And I realized I need to go change society. I need to go change public perception. And now there's an a cappella Grammy, and Pentatonics has won it, and Jacob Collier's won it, and so we've made great strides in people recognizing and appreciating and respecting what's going on in vocal music nowadays.
yeah, that's exciting. Now, I would like to drill into one final topic, and you kind of touched on it, and
Please.
it's kind of one of the main ones we wanted to talk about. You mentioned a second ago that you don't think of vocal music and group music as just a kind of a fun thing for kids to do at school. You think of it as a life-changing, world-changing, maybe even life-saving educational experience, artistic experience, all of that. Now, of course, I
Yep.
completely agree. That's one of the things that lights my fire every day when I go to school is I know how many kids that I personally have saved from suicide. I know how many
Yeah.
kids that have been saved from some type of tragic event in their life, not because necessarily even
Yep.
me personally, but because of the community that's been built in my
Of course.
classroom around the
Yeah.
music. And I think this is where this is, and I want to hear your thoughts about this too, because this is what I think people sometimes struggle to understand is they think, well, kids are just happy in the choir room because Mr. Muntz must be just really nice and he just cares about them and whatever. And I do, but I think people underestimate the power of the music itself, number one, and also of the act of doing the music together and the vulnerability that you have to have in order to do the music, vocal music in particular, with each other that creates that community that would cause a kid maybe who's at risk of a really bad thing in their life
Yep.
to know that they've got a place to be, that keep showing up to school, that they get addicted to that environment, and it does actually literally save their life.
Preach. Yeah, everything you said, I agree with 1,000%. So if we go back and we try to figure out how is it we are the way we are, and we try to look at prehistoric tribes, we try to look at what is it that we evolutionarily were evolved into, and how can we create an experience on this planet for people that's positive, reinforcing, beneficial, etc. We're used to existing in small units, 50 people or fewer.
Hmm.
In fact, some people think the early tribes were a dozen people or whatever. What does that replicate? That replicates a choir. And all of these people working together, understanding that what you get and you give, you connect with other people, everybody shares at the end of the hunt. And then at the end of the hunt, you get together around the fire, right? You tell stories, you sing, you connect, and you feel like you're part of something. That's your
Hmm.
tribe. And there's a sense of this also when you're on a sports team, right? There's not like that sense of connection. But unlike sports, with vocal music, if you do it right, you always win. You
Yeah.
always win.
Yep.
You win, the audience wins, you create this incredible sense, and kids need
And everyone's a
wins,
starter.
real wins.
Everyone's a starter.
Everyone's a starter,
Yeah.
but also almost nobody's a soloist, right?
Right. Right.
So you spend most of your time helping and backing up everyone else. Occasionally you get a little moment in the spotlight, but it's not about that. It's never been about that, right? And everybody realizes I'm important and what I bring is important. Low voices, high voices. Also, we spend so much time talking about the power of diversity and how much diversity brings. But honestly, there are a lot of people who whisper under their breath, yeah, but it'd be a lot easier for me to just deal with these buddies of mine and us to just like do this computer project, us to just build this thing. Like we know how to make it ourselves, and it's easier to work with people who are like myself. But you can't do as much, and
Hmm.
a college a cappella group is a great example. You've got your high voices, you got your low voices, you got your like boy choir trained people who, when they're up floating on a note, it sounds like crystal. And then you've got your gospel trained singers who can bring all this power and pizzazz and energy to a performance. You've got the people who are strong rhythmically, who add vocal percussion. You've got, all of the pieces. And that's really an experience that I want everyone to have in high school, in college, and then in beyond. I mean, this is, I have a motto, like, sing for your life. Like, don't just stop singing because you graduated school. And for the choral directors who are out there, another little seed I'm going to plant in your area is, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
Unlike Europe, America does not have a tradition of pop choirs, but we have a deep, deep need for it. There are 4,000 or 5,000 college a cappella singers graduating each year who would gladly join a choir in their area, a singing group, whatever, if it existed in the style they want. There are church choirs, which are wonderful. There are some barbershop choirs, and the barbershop tradition is fantastic, right? Occasionally, there are community choirs that are out there. They tend to be a little more come one, come all. But if you build a pop choir in your area, probably within a year, you'll have dozens of people who are there, happy to pay an annual fee to be able to be a part of this whole thing. And then you've got a whole other thing you get to do on the side, have a little more money in your pocket, and have a whole different way to reach your community and create more harmony and reach more people of all ages.
Yeah, that's inspiring, and I totally agree. I think this is this is the type of advocacy that I'm really all about. It's like, okay, do we get on Facebook and just complain about people not appreciating our art form enough, or do we get out there and show them? And I think what you're describing is you're getting out there and showing them.
You have to. Yeah. Nobody cares. I'm sorry. Nobody cares. And there's like great things. A lot of kids are growing up with the sense of like, everybody loves me. Like, I'm great. I'm wonderful at this. Or they have their sense of self-worth completely eviscerated by social media. When my son came to me when he was 14 years old, he said, "Dad, Justin Bieber was discovered and popular when he was 14. Does that mean I'm a failure?" And I'm like, oh God, look what's happened. When I was 14, all I did was compare myself against a couple of the other tenors, hoping to get like a lead or a supporting lead in the musical in our little show. You know what I mean? Like that was the entirety of the competition. Comparing yourself to the whole world is just like mind-blowingly horrible. So it's both like the best of times and the worst of times. We have the ability to reach people around the world. You can make a music video and have it go viral and have millions of people see your choir singing. And this happens month after month, year after year. You can go online and see these groups that have been really successful. But you know what it is that draws people in? It's the smiles on their faces. It's the warmth in their hearts. When people feel good and they see young singers singing and they're like, wow, and they take away a feeling from it, they glow, right?
Yep. Those emotions are contagious.
They are, and they really are the thing that draws people come and keeps them coming back. There are choral programs out there where people in the community just want to see this concert every single year because it's wonderful.
Yeah.
So make your shows wonderful, right? And then they will come. And then there's more money in your choral budget, and then there are more kids who want to be a part of it because, hey, look, there are a lot of people in the house, and it's not just like mom and my big sister who got dragged along.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's what it's all about. Well, Deke, this was so much fun, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's my pleasure. And I hope to cross paths with you in person and with any and all of you choral directors who are out there. Let me leave you with this thought.
Absolutely.
You guys are on the front line. Like I get to do some fun things, and hopefully when I'm working with kids and with singers of all ages, I'm able to make a positive impact on their lives for a day. But like you said, you're the one who's there at 7:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. You're the one who stays after school and wipes the tears. Those of you who have made a career of choral music are literally changing lives. Some of them will come back and tell you about the incredible impacts that you've had on their lives, and other ones never will get a chance to. But you are doing that. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for helping to make this world a much, much better place. And if there's anything I can do for any of you, I will happily do it. I send free arrangements all the time. I shoot little videos and like say hello to the choir, and your director is doing this, and here's some cool stuff, like whatever. And I will happily do that for anybody who's interested, because I want to just make your jobs easier and hopefully keep your singers excited. So you can find me online at dekesharon.com or send me an email. Social media, I'm Deke Sharon everywhere, etc.
And people will be able to go into the show notes of this, and any links you send me after we sign off, I can drop them in there. Any projects upcoming, websites, YouTube channel, any of those types of things that you want people to know about, they can find them in the show notes. Sound good?
Beautiful. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you, as always, for sticking around to the end of an episode. I was sucked in that whole time. I could have kept talking to Deke for a while. That was just a really, really fun and thought-provoking way to think about advocacy and the way we talk about our art form and the way we simply get out there and show it to people and prove passionately that what we're doing makes a difference. So thank you so much for sticking around. Don't forget, on your way out, like, share, leave comments, join the Coralosphers Facebook group, join the Patreon. That's a big deal. Patreon.com/Coralosophy. $3 a month. It's like going to Starbucks. Not even less than Starbucks now with inflation. One thing that has not been affected by inflation is the cost of my Patreon. So head over there. And then, of course, any way that you can interact or share episodes from the show is very helpful. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.